people are in their own home for the most part. They feel safe and secure. They start getting asked those questions about personal information. I think, well, there's no bad guys here. I'm in my own home. I'm okay. I can just answer this question. And they're being given information too, which essentially is false, because the people are just lying to them and giving information and then expecting, oh, well, they were telling me something, so I'm just going to respond to it.
Stay on edge. If the call is alarming to you, hang up the phone. Frankly, it's better to risk being perceived as a little bit rude than it is to lose money.
There's no shame. Everybody can actually fall victim to some sort of scam because we all have our own triggers that people can prey on. What that trigger is definitely personal and changes from person to person.
I got a phone call saying this is, and he gave my grandson's name, and it sounded like the average, 18 or 19-year-old young fellow. I was going to send to my grandson the $9,500. Yeah.
And how were you sending that money?
By FedEx.
That's how he said he wanted you to send it?
Yes, and it was an address in Montreal.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Semkiw.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Marissa Semkiw. We've all received them. Fishy emails, suspicious text messages, phone calls asking for sensitive information that you wouldn't normally give over the phone. These are often scams, and they're becoming more common. From fake lottery winnings to calls from the tax man, there are thousands of scams that seek to defraud you of your cash and identity. In 2017, Canadians lost over $95 million because of scams, according to the Better Business Bureau. What's worse is that number is actually far bigger because it's believed that only 5% of victims actually come forward to report a crime. It's big business, and it's only getting bigger. At the roundtable, I'm joined by several experts to discuss this growing threat and how to avoid falling victim. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
Each year, Canadians lose millions to a growing number of complex scams. Here are the top 5 in Canada, ranked by the amount of money lost last year. Number 5, the CRA scam. This con is quickly becoming one of the largest cyber scamming operations in Canadian history. At least 74,000 Canadians have been targeted and more than 15 million stolen over the last 5 years. Number 4, the employment scam. It targets people looking for a job and lures them into sending personal information. Number 3, the online purchase scam. This reported losses of more than 13 million last year.
Oh dear!
It covers a range of frauds from counterfeit goods to fake trial offers. Number 2, the romance scam. This scam cost Canadians more than 19 million last year. It preys on the victim's false sense of relationship to lure them into sending money. And number 1, the spear phishing scam. Canadians lost more than 20 million last year from this email spoofing attack, which targets specific individuals and organizations and tricks them into giving valuable information.
Now, that was a quick overview of some of the top scams, but of course there are thousands more. Clara, what are some of the scams that you've encountered that target Zoomers specifically?
Unfortunately, we see a lot of scams through our work at the office. A popular one relates to charities, false charities. So people will get either a knock on the door or a telephone call from an organization that sounds very similar, perhaps to a real charity, asking for money, and then people will write a check or wire money and poof, it's gone. All of the scams that were mentioned at the outset are also unfortunately common. The CRA is probably the most common scam that we hear about at our office. There's a popular scam relating to cruises where people are induced into investing into a cruise program, thinking that they're going to be saving money and getting great deals on vacations, and again, the money never comes back.
You know, it's interesting. I feel like I've actually been the victim of it. Well, I haven't necessarily fallen victim to these scams, but I've received those phone calls, that cruise phone call, not so much the religious one, but I wonder, Constable Bessie Wood, who's the target? I mean, who's the primary target for scams in Canada today, or is everyone a target?
Well, I definitely think everyone is a target, because when I do a lot of our presentations, it's, this can happen to anybody no matter what age you are, so you have to be aware. I think these bad guys and bad girls, as I call them, are targeting some of our older friends simply because they're lovely and they're trustworthy, right? They were brought up to, treat other people the way you want to be treated. I tell the truth, so people who call me are telling me the truth, and they're going to believe them when they call them. So
is that why you think seniors are a tempting target?
I do, because when someone calls and says, I'm calling from the CRA and you owe some money, they might just, okay, well then I'll deal with it, because this is how it's supposed to work, and if I owe some money, then maybe I'll deal with it. Another thing too is they may not be so quick to ask questions to confirm that information, and I always say there's no silly question. Confirm that information, from the call that you're receiving, whoever the caller is. Call a loved one, call a family member, talk to your neighbor. A lot of the groups we speak to, I said, bring your notes or the letters that you're receiving to the group in which, whether it's a church group or a senior center. And I also give out my card, and say, call me. It's a conversation. What do you think about this?
These scams seem to be getting more sophisticated, Paul, and the CRA scam in particular is no exception.
That's right. I mean, we're seeing that the phone calls are coming in where they look like they're coming from area code 613, which is Ottawa. People look at that and they say, well, that looks like it's the government that's calling me, so I should take this seriously. Or we're seeing emails coming in that have the Government of Canada logo in it, and it looks official. It looks like, oh yeah, that looks like something the Government of Canada would be using. Of course, we don't communicate by email. So it's a totally fraudulent mode of communicating with people. But yeah, there is a level of sophistication there that we're seeing that people just have to be educated and be warned about it, which is why I come out here as a CRA official to talk to people, say, this is something you really have to be aware of.
Yeah. Spear phishing is #1 on the list, Yaniv. That's especially sophisticated, speaking of how these scams have evolved and are getting more tricky. What is it? How do we watch out for it?
Well, basically the difference between a normal phishing attack and a spear phishing attack is the amount of effort that goes into it to try and entice the target group in order to actually fall for it. A spear phishing attack will already have quite a bit of information that was gathered beforehand in order to customize the message to make it appear more real. As was just mentioned, for example, it will have the appropriate logo, or it will seem to come from the actual email address or a phone number of the same area code. Normal phishing emails will not be that sophisticated. They might have more spelling mistakes because they aim at a different target audience. But the spear phishing one is more dangerous because it seems way more legitimate. It's harder to notice that it is a scam.
Modern technology has definitely made it cheaper and easier for artists or scam artists to target larger groups of people. And what strikes me is how willing we are to share personal information. In your experience, Constable Bessie Wood, have you found that? I mean, when you think about most people wouldn't be so willing to share their social insurance number, for example, if someone was to come up to them and ask for that. But our cell phone number is something that we very freely hand out. Why do you think that is?
Well, and I would talk about that all the time, and especially compare it to, meeting somebody on the street and them asking personal information. You'd say, hi, how are you? But then they start asking questions. You'd be like, no, leave me alone. When it comes to the technology part of it all, it gets a little bit, it's more difficult, I guess, because people are in their own home for the most part. They feel safe and secure. They start getting asked those questions about personal information. I think, well, there's no bad guys here. I'm in my own home. I'm okay. I can just answer this question. And they're being given information too, which essentially is false, because the people are just lying to them and giving information and then expecting, oh, well, they were telling me something, so I'm just going to respond to it.
The role technology plays in this is I find really fascinating. How do you think our reliance on technology has made us easier to fool?
Technology is basically an enabler. Now, in the past, you would have seen people rummaging through trash to get your personal details, going through your credit card statements or something like that. These days, everybody is getting used to shopping online. And for example, if you're shopping outside of your house in a public network, do you really know whether there's anyone else who's trying to gather that information? The definition of what's normal and what's not normal has changed drastically since the introduction of technological advancements. in the past, we didn't even think about buying stuff from the comfort of our house. Everybody had to go out and basically look at stores and decide what they're basically choosing, and then decide when you actually take out your credit card, and you know where you actually take your credit card out for, and you see the person in front of you. These days, half of the websites either verify your age by the use of a credit card or ask you to pay by a credit card. So the legitimate ones also make us complacent because it becomes normal. So when somebody else asks for what is already normal, we're not as likely to think that it's not.
That's a good point. Okay, well, when we come back, we'll break down one of the largest cyber scams in Canadian history. Stay tuned.
If you're suspicious, if you think that the person on the other end of the line is not a CRA officer, you can hang up and call the CRA, 1-800-959-8281, which is our general inquiries people, and say, hi, I've got this phone call. I want to find out for sure, am I in collection status? Do I owe you money?
Cyber scamming operations in Canadian history. The Canada Revenue Agency phone scam has targeted more than 74,000 Canadians and bilked at least 4,000 individuals out of over $15 million. In spite of public awareness campaigns, the number of Canadian victims continues to grow. Paul, start us off here. How does this scheme work?
Well, typically what will happen, you'll get a phone call saying, you owe us money, you owe Canada Revenue Agency some money. They'll give an officer's name or something like that. And they'll say, well, you have to pay immediately. You need to pay in full right now, or we will send the police after you to arrest you. There's all sorts of threats that they provide. They use threatening language, aggressive language to get you to commit yourself to a payment right away. And that's not typically how the CRA is ever going to talk to you over the telephone. We're going to talk to you, if we get to the point where we're talking to you on the telephone, we're going to talk to you about, well, are there ways that you can pay and make a payment arrangement that will be mutually acceptable to us, things like that.
In fact, I have received a phone call from the CRA before, and I've hung up the phone and I've called them back. And it turned out to actually be the CRA. But you can never be too sure. I've actually heard some folks actually showing up to people's doors. They're that brazen.
Yeah, we've heard that as well, and that's not typically the first line of approach that a CRA officer will take towards you, is to come to your door and knock on it.
You know, one of the biggest tragedies of all of this, Constable, is that it only takes a small amount of people to be targeted for this to work and for these guys to be successful. You know, 74,000 people were targeted, but only 4,000 fell for it. And I say only 4,000 because it's small compared to the number of people that they've targeted. But still, they've been able to steal over $15 million, and that's just what we know. You know, there's a very small percentage of people that actually come forward to talk about this. Why do you think that is? 5%, 5%.
Well, I think a lot of it is they're ashamed, right? They don't want, who do they tell? They tell their children that they made a mistake and that they're out $5,000 or $10,000, that they've given that away. Because then the response, they're afraid that they're going to look at them and say, oh, Mom, why are you an idiot? What did you do that for? So I think a lot of it is just a shame that they're not prepared to speak up about it. I always tell people, though, that it's so important to share with your friends, to let you know, you let your neighbors know, let your friends know, whether you've given money or not. People don't even need to know. Like, you tell your friend about a scam, whether you gave money or not, you can say, oh, just be aware of this. I got this letter, or I got this call saying they're the CRA. Just be aware, because, you know, it doesn't come around always around tax time. It could come any time of year. So just talking about it is what we encourage people to do, because hopefully by hearing something, or, you know, a new way of doing business for these bad guys or bad girls, then hopefully that'll clue people in to, oh, just start to question it.
This is obviously an issue that has attracted the attention of the Advocacy Centre for the Elderly, because seniors are a particular target and are particularly vulnerable to this type of scam. What have you heard from folks calling you?
With the CRA scam, we've heard both sides of the coin. Some where they have been getting the very threatening calls saying you better pay up right now or else the police are going to come knocking on your door. There's also the reverse where they're calling and saying, hey, congratulations, you're actually going to get an extra rebate this year. So you just need to provide us with some information and will be sending you a check in the mail. So people need to be cautious on both sides. We have heard, as Bussy has said, a great deal of shame associated with individuals who have been victims of scams, which is really the saddest part of it all, perhaps, because anybody can fall victim. I think older adults are particularly vulnerable in large part because they're home during the day, and a lot of the telephone calls happen during the day, or a lot of the knocks on the door happen during the day. And so it's just a numbers game.
You raise a good point. Not only are these scams financially devastating, they're psychologically devastating too, are they not?
Yes, completely. It can be the start of a really stressful period in somebody's life, unfortunately.
How would the CRA contact people? I know you've mentioned it in the past, but just remind our audience how the CRA would contact you if you needed to be contacted.
Yeah, the bulk of our contact with Canadians is through the mail. We'll send you a letter, a notice of assessment, a reassessment, a statement of account, or a letter saying you have amounts to pay. That's the main avenue that the CRA uses to communicate with Canadians. We never use email to send to, for example, the Interact e-transfer scam, where people get an email saying, click on this link, you have a refund due to you, and if you provide us with your social insurance number and personal information, then we're going to send you a refund. The CRA doesn't communicate that way. We don't use email. We never text anybody. We do use the telephone, but as I said, it was only usually typically after we've sent you written notices.
Now, I'm curious, have you had trouble actually reaching people because people are so skeptical of anyone contacting them from the CRA?
We have noticed that as a result of these scams that are ongoing, it's created this this fear and this belief that that there's no genuine CRA communication via telephone. It's created this widespread kind of skepticism, and so we do remind people that we do communicate by phone. If you're suspicious, if you think that the person on the other end of the line is not a CRA officer, you can hang up and call the CRA, 1-800-959-8281, which is our general inquiries people, and say, hi, I've got this phone call. I want to find out for sure, am I in collection status? Do I owe you money?
Now, what's the CRA doing about this scam?
Well, the bulk of our operations are education. We have a fairly extensive website, canada.ca/taxes-fraud-prevention. That's our main source of information for people. We go out and do these types of interviews, as I've been doing throughout Canada, throughout the past couple of years. So that's mostly what we do, and we partner with law enforcement, with particularly the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, which is, I believe, the RCMP and OPP operation that I believe the constable here would know more about. But that's our main source of how we attack this problem.
And from an advocacy perspective, what's the Advocacy Centre for the Elderly doing about this to reach out to people?
Well, if people call us and ask us about it, we warn them about what's happening. It's not a major part of our mandate that we're doing education work around the CRA scam in particular, but we do a lot of public legal education, and scams are always a part of our financial abuse education programs.
Okay, terrific. All right, well, when we come back, a 90-year-old scam victim shares her cautionary tale. That's next.
I got a phone call saying this is, and he gave my grandson's name, and it sounded like the average, 18 or 19-year-old young fellow. He told me a long story about driving a car and getting into an accident, and he was in a police station, and the man that he'd bumped into would not charge him if he would give him $9,000.
Well, welcome back. My next guest was the victim of the so-called grandparent scam. Mary Mahoney of Toronto was tricked into paying nearly $10,000 in cash to a fraudster. She joins me now to share her story. Mary, take us back to when the incident first started. What happened?
What happened? I got a phone call saying this is, and he gave my grandson's name, and it sounded like the average, 18 or 19-year-old young fellow.
He knew your grandson's name?
Yes, he did.
Well, that's scary.
We wondered how he did that, but Facebook, I don't know.
Yeah. So he gave you a call, and and what did he say?
Oh, he told me a long story about driving a car and getting into an accident, and he was in a police station, and the man that he'd bumped into would not charge him if he would give him $9,000.
Unbelievable.
I know.
No matter how smart you are, anyone can fall victim to someone preying on their emotions.
He sounded very much like my grandson. He did.
He did?
Yes.
And he preyed on your emotions. How did he make you feel when he called you?
Very worried and think, oh my goodness, what can I do to help him, you know?
And so what were your next steps? What did you do next?
Oh, I guess I said I would do it, and then I went to my bank, and I asked, wrote a slip for $10,000 because I needed some of myself. I was going to send to my grandson the $9,500. Yes.
And how were you sending that money?
By FedEx.
That's how he said he wanted you to send it?
Yes, and it was an address in Montreal.
Wow.
Which was obviously, some kind of scam.
No, it's a lot of money. How significant was that to you?
It was pretty significant, yes. Big chunk.
A big chunk of money.
Yeah.
And at what point did alarm bells ring that maybe this wasn't right?
2 days later.
Okay, so by the time the cash had already arrived.
Oh, yes, that's right. I thought, I'd better go and tell him he can't get out of it like this. He's got to tell his parents, my grandson.
So did he tell you on the phone call, don't tell mom and dad? Is that?
I don't remember. Okay. I think he probably did.
But you never called anyone?
Yes.
You never called anyone to tell them that you were sending that money?
No, I never called anyone, no.
You never, and so 2 days later, and did you ever call to check up on him to see if he'd received the cash?
No, I didn't. Well, it wasn't my grandson that was getting the cash. It was this strange address in Montreal.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, you're not alone on this. This happens to surprisingly a lot of people. Now, when you went into TD and you asked to take the cash out, did they ask you any specific questions?
Oh, well, they gave me the money, but the teller went inside and came out with an older gentleman, and they called me back and asked me what I needed it for, and I don't think I I wasn't going to tell them what I needed it for.
Sure.
But they said, I think, so far as I recall, they made a suggestion. Is it for renovations or something? So I grabbed onto this and said, oh yes, it was for renovations.
Now, 2 days later, when you
I thought
started
it over.
to think that something was fishy,
I thought, I'd better phone my grandson and tell him he's got to tell his parents.
and so what
So
happened?
I did that, and my daughter-in-law, I heard her call him. It was a Saturday morning, he was asleep in bed. And as soon as I heard his voice, I thought, oh, what have I done? Yeah,
Oh,
I knew.
really?
Yeah.
And did you tell him what had happened?
I explained to my son and daughter-in-law, yes.
And that's when you realized that you'd been scammed.
As soon as I heard my grandson's voice, I knew. I don't know why, but somehow I did. Yeah.
Yes, because he probably would have said thank you for doing that, Grandma.
Yeah.
Or he might have. So what happened next? Did you take steps to get the money back, or?
Well, I went to the bank and talked to them, and the bank manager set up an appointment and talked to me and my daughter, but they absolutely would not, take any responsibility or give me the money back. No. That's the end of it, pretty well.
And so has life just moved on?
Yeah.
How have you been since this incident?
Very much annoyed with myself, I tell you.
You probably replay it over and over in your head. I know I would.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you're not alone. I have a friend whose grandmother, same thing happened. She got the phone call, she picked up, he said, Grandma. She said, hi, Andrew. Right then and there, he knew that she was the grandmother and that she had a grandson named Andrew.
Of course.
He learned that information in a split second.
Yeah, that's right.
And sure enough, the money, she went down to a Western Union, sent the money, and there was no recovering those losses.
That's right.
It's really tragic when it happens, and that they would prey on older Canadians is just horrible, but...
Well, they'll prey on anybody they want to.
Well, we're going to head to the table next, and we'll talk to them about maybe if there's steps that you can take from here. So when we come back, how to spot a scam and what to do if you think you've been the victim of one. That's next.
Like if something doesn't fit, if it doesn't seem right, then abandon it. Like just garbage, delete it, throw it out. I mean, as far as the grandparent one, we hear this all the time. And I always say, there is no emergency in any scam. Take your time.
Welcome back. Anybody can fall victim to a scam. We all lead busy lives and it only takes a moment of inattention to fall into a trap. So how can you stay safe when fraudsters are increasingly sophisticated and convincing? Let's start with advice for Mary. Clara, what advice do you have for her?
Well, Mary, you've taken all of the steps that we recommend in a situation like this. You contacted your family, who you trust, to let them know what had happened. You went to your bank. You've made a report to the police. And I understand that now you are extra cautious about any phone calls that you may get. And unfortunately, in a lot of situations, that's the very best that can be done. It's a hard lesson learned when you lose such a significant sum of money. But getting that money back in almost every case is next to impossible.
Have you heard of any cases where people have been able to get their money back?
In the case of door-to-door salespeople who sell people fraudulent equipment, which is quite common and we consider to be a scam at our office, there are situations where people can get money back then because there are particular laws that protect consumers in those cases. But any case that involves wiring money, sending a check in the mail, giving cash, using a Bitcoin machine, I've never heard of a case where the money has been recovered, unfortunately.
Yaniv, what are some of the red flags for our audience that they should be watching out for?
Well, scam artists are basically running a business. They need to have a return on their investment. Their investment is time. More often than not, they will try to incite a sense of urgency in whatever type of scam that they're trying to pull. The best advice is always slow down. Consult somebody that you trust, like you did, Marissa, for example. Hang up and call back to the actual number you find on the internet.
That's a good idea.
But one of the best things to do is always prolong the interaction for as long as possible. Don't commit to anything, definitely not in the first or second conversation. The longer it actually takes, the more likely the other side is also going to abandon it because they don't want to waste time on something or someone they won't be able to get any return from.
Or I would say, don't let that second conversation happen. Stay on edge. If the call is alarming to you, hang up the phone. Frankly, it's better to risk being perceived as a little bit rude than it is to lose money.
What are some of the other red flags? Spelling mistakes, for example, is a big one that stands out to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a lady show me a letter that she had received from a lawyer, and it looked legitimate. She came to me after a presentation and said, this looks really legitimate. It looked like it was from a lawyer. It had stamped and everything. And the spelling and everything seemed to be pretty good. But then when she actually said, when I looked at the envelope that it came in, on the top left corner of the envelope, it said Costco. Wow. I said, well, good on you, because I don't know if I would have caught that.
Yeah.
So just random things like that, like that don't fit. Like if something doesn't fit, if it doesn't seem right, then abandon it. Like just garbage, delete it, throw it out. I mean, as far as the grandparent one, we hear this all the time. And I always say, there is no emergency in any scam. Take your time. Worst case, if it is your granddaughter or your grandson, you know what? One night in jail won't kill them. Leave them there. Figure it out before we send any money, right? Just figure it out. If it means calling your son or your daughter-in-law and you can't get a hold of them right away, well, then you keep trying until you get a hold of them. And the more forceful they are on the phone on the other end, whether it's a lawyer or your son, grandson or whoever, that's when, you know, the hair on your arm starts standing up. And
but your grandson has given you no reason to ever not believe him. And so I understand why you might have believed that this was in fact him and asking for that large sum of money. It's your grandson, you would have done anything for him. Another thing that we need to watch out for, of course, is those generic messages. But Yaniv, how do you think they knew her grandson's name?
Well, there are a lot of different ways. There might have been previous emails that were sent, social network accounts. It might have been from previous correspondences, or even the old-fashioned way of actually looking through someone's trash. Today, there are so many ways to actually get information about people that we actually always need to be careful on who's giving us information back and where they might have gotten it from.
Mm-hmm. Where are these scam artists in the world? Are they in Canada or they're anywhere? I know with the CRA, the RCMP is tracking them back to Mumbai.
Yeah, there was a recent series of arrests that took place that was reported on that, yeah, the RCMP was able to track down to a call center in India.
All right.
And that's one thing to watch out. Like a red flag that I always warn people about is the payment method. Somebody's on the phone saying, I need money right now, you have to pay me. Government of Canada, Canada Revenue Agency, whoever, saying, okay, well, how am I going to pay you? It has to be by a gift card. Nobody's going to ask you to pay by a gift card. The Government of Canada is not going to ask you to go to the store and buy an iTunes gift card. But people are doing that, and it's one of the common scams we've heard about, Google Play cards. Cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin ATM. Not a lot of people so far may be cognizant of or aware of what a Bitcoin is, so they think, oh, it's just like a regular bank machine. Well, it's cryptocurrency, it's untraceable, and it's something that these scammers will latch onto. Say, you're going to pay the Government of Canada your income tax debt via untraceable cryptocurrency. Well, that's got to be a red flag right away. As soon as you hear that, that's not the government talking to you.
If you have been the victim of a scam, what should we do? Clara.
In terms of a first step, we always suggest that people get help, and that can look in different ways. If you have a trusted neighbor, family member, friend, talk to them and get support. In most cases, it is appropriate to contact your local police and make a report, so always take that step. Any accounts that may have been compromised during the course of this scam, so any bank that you accessed money from, if any of your utility bills may have been involved somehow, contact all of those account keepers, so your bank, your utility company, everything. And in some cases, it's necessary to contact Equifax or credit union to put an alert on your credit score that there has been fraudulent activity in your accounts. That's a way that you can help protect yourself. In some cases, contacting a lawyer can be helpful, although as we've already said, in terms of actually recovering the money, there's very little that can be done in most cases. Damage control is the important step to take once you realize that something has happened.
So legal recourse, there's not a lot of legal avenues you can take to get the money back? I guess if you don't know who the swindler was, then...
Yeah, so in Canada, we have a legal system that allows you to recover money from somebody who has unlawfully taken it from you or try to recover that money. But you have to know who took it. They almost always have to be in Canada, and you would rarely know either of those two pieces of information in these types of cases. So yes, the money that's taken is almost always money that's gone.
Final question, Yaniv, we'll go to you. You are a bit of a tech wizard. And so I wonder, what would you do if you had been conned?
Well,
would you be able to track the person back?
Again, I think I should follow the exact same steps as were mentioned just now. There's no real recourse, because even trying to invest your own time to find that person, he's probably not in the same country, so then what? I think the best thing is, again, share your story, make sure that other people are aware of it, make sure that as many people as possible will actually also learn from your experience. There's no shame. At the end of the day, as you've mentioned, everybody can actually fall victim to some sort of scam, because we all have our own triggers that people can prey on. What that trigger is definitely personal and changes from person to person. But people need to understand that, like Mary, sharing this story and learning from it and making sure that others will not repeat the same mistake is as important as anything else.
Absolutely. All right, well, there's more after the break, so stay tuned.
My father, who is here in the audience, who is 91 years old, a couple of months ago was scammed out of $8,200. And it happened so fast. And how do I protect him during the daytime when he's prone to these type of calls or solicitations?
Well, welcome back. Walt from our audience has joined us to ask his question. Walt, welcome to the roundtable.
So I'm here today because my father, who is here in the audience, who is 91 years old, a couple of months ago was scammed out of $8,200. And it happened so fast. It happened within a couple of hours during the daytime, like was suggested. Same situation that happened to you. And my question is, how do I protect my father? I am his caregiver. I'm his personal caregiver. And how do I protect him during the daytime when he's prone to these type of calls or solicitations?
Yeah.
I always just try to tell people, just be careful, beware. Like it's almost like repetition, right? Just reminding them, Dad, be careful when, if someone calls and starts asking for personal information or asking about your credit card or anything like that, just immediately hang up the phone. I always tell people, keep a pen and paper beside the phone too, write down anything that they're saying, because I tend to forget things a lot. So at my house, that's what I do. I write down numbers that are calling, names and numbers, and so I can confirm who it is if I'm asking them again. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a lot of repetition. And when people start asking for that type of information, whether it's personal information or you owe money and there's an urgency, as soon as there's that urgency, hang up the phone.
So I wanted to share with you, my father became very depressed over the loss and very paranoid over telephone calls. And so what he decided to do was not answer any calls anymore, but let them go to voicemail, let them go to the answering machine. And what we find during the daytime is that he does receive a number of telephone calls, and when the answering machine does kick in, there's never a message. And so my father sits there and listens to that, and then he knows that this process is continuing. And so at 91 years old, he's very disappointed.
Absolutely. They also have, Paul referred to it, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre as well. So that's basically a national database through the RCMP and OPP, where if you're getting reoccurring numbers or emails or anything like that, you can report that to them, and they will keep track of that. And if at any point they get sort of information that they're like a lead, essentially, then they will investigate and try and find out where these calls or where they're coming from, if it's at all possible.
So he just received that the other day in the mail. And that was a result of the police report and the police being involved in the investigation. So he received a package and he read through it. There were a number of pamphlets and some suggestions. And sure enough, in the mail, he received a letter that he was part of a $57 million fortune and that he needed to share information. And so what we did is we sent that to the agency for them to have. And it's what's nice about this is that my father's become educated. And I think you have become educated through your experience. And it's a shame that they prone upon seniors, but unfortunately that's the way it is these days.
Clara, how common is Walt's story?
My understanding is, unfortunately, very common. These scammers run volume businesses, so they are calling all day, every day, until something sticks. And unfortunately, the situation is that it's sticking more often with older and vulnerable individuals.
Thank you for sharing your story. Do you have any other questions?
No, but thank you very much. This was very helpful, and my father's here in the audience, so thank you for the opportunity for him to hear that he's not alone.
No, not at all.
He's not. All right. Well, when we come back, some final thoughts.
On Facebook, Claire writes, "It's sad to hear about how many people are out there that are just trying to get their hands in your pockets. Be aware of scammers. They're getting harder and harder to spot." On Twitter, Justin tweets, "Scammers are getting smarter, to the point where they could know almost everything about you. It's crazy to think that someone's profession is to rip people off. #scammers. Keep the comments coming in, and don't forget to log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
our panelists. We'll leave you with some final thoughts now, starting to my left. Clara.
The most important takeaway from my perspective is do not give out any personal information, no matter how benign it might seem, unless you yourself placed the call to a trusted number. You just can't be too careful in these situations. Yanni?
Well, from my perspective, I would say never allow anyone to rush you to make any decisions relating anything financial, and always try and share things with someone that you truly trust.
Mary.
Well, I'm not going to do that again. No, I've had a couple of calls and recognized them for what they were. So, yeah.
Have you had the same phone call again?
Not the same one, but similar ones, yes. So I just hang up, and that's what you should do, hang up.
You know, as polite as we're supposed to be, hang up the phone. It's okay to hang up the phone. When you're not sure or you don't know who it is that's calling, just hang up the phone. And there is no emergency in any of these scams. Take your time, figure it out, call the trusted family member. Again, call the police, call us. If you have a concern, it's a conversation. Take the time.
Yeah, I just want to say the CRA wants people to be, Canadians to be aware of these fraudulent communications. Be cautious. When in doubt, if it's suspicious, hang up. You can call the CRA directly if you've been contacted and you think that there's something suspicious going on. Call us or check your account online.
What's that number that they can call you at?
Sure. It's 1-800-959-8281.
All right. Okay. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you to my panelists for being here and to the audience, of course. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.